Okay. Okay. So we kind of, we don't have a, big official PowerPoint presentation about this, but we wanted to talk a little bit about our experience with promotion and tenure and just kind of expectations and things that what happens along the process in the process. And so really let me start with helping you
Before you
understand.
do that, Alicia, could you like increase that size just a little bit?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Of course. No. Does that work?
Yes, thank you.
There. Um, so it's sometimes called P&T, right? Promotion and tenure. And so the first thing that I didn't really know about before I went into academia is it's really two separate kind of processes, sort of. It's two separate. You go up for promotion, and then you can go up for tenure. Most of the time, you go up for them at the same time, but they are technically two separate distinctions, I guess you could say. Um, so someone could get promoted, but maybe not get tenure, or they're not necessarily they don't have to go together. Um, and the other thing that I didn't know about is kind of the time frame for it, and I'm hearing more and more that some universities have different timelines. Um, and you can certainly negotiate a shortened timeline sometimes. You can go up for tenure early or promotion and tenure early sometimes. Um, but for the most part, it is 5 years worth of work, at a university. And then you apply throughout your 6th year, and then it officially starts your 7th year. So Dr. Patton and I both just went through all of this, and her situation's a little different because she got some time served. But I had 5 years worth of work at Our Lady of the Lake. I applied during my 6th year, and then I'm in my 7th year, and I started as an associate professor in the 7th year. So it goes from assistant to associate, associate to full. Is that right?
Mhm,
So, and then is there anything after full? I don't think so. No.
mhm.
So,
You have arrived when you get to full.
yes. So that is the fairly standard kind of tenure process is if you go in a tenure position as an assistant professor, you work for 5 years. Throughout your 6th year, you're still an assistant professor, but you're applying for tenure. And then if you get it, you find out in your 6th year, and you officially start as an associate faculty in the 7th year. I think full professor, ooh, don't quote me on this. Is it 4 years and you go up your 5th year?
Yes, and this is all based on OLU policy. I wanted to say that because some universities are a little bit different. Like the system I came from, UNT system, you actually don't submit your tenure packet from assistant to associate until the end of your 6th year. They're reviewing your packet in your 7th year, and you get your associate professor in your 8th year. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So the other thing that usually happens, and about year 3. So my 3rd year at the university, we had a mid tenure review, and so that's where you submit most everything that you have done up to that point, and the committee will review it to see how you're doing in terms of being on track for tenure. Oftentimes especially at R1 universities, I've seen this. Um, if a faculty member does not have a good 3rd year review, that is kind of the time frame when people might move to go somewhere else, to a different university. If they kind of see that they're coming up short of their trajectory for tenure, if they're just not happy with where they're at, kind of the mid-year review, around year 3 is kind of a jumping ship point, or has been in my experience. For some people, you see that happen sometimes, especially R1s where the expectations for promotion and tenure are much higher. And much, I don't know that I would say higher, but they're just different. Um, it really is a process of looking at all of your work that you have done in the 5 years that you have been there. So when you guys are working on your CV right now and updating it, that is going to be something that you do your entire life. So find a CV, outline that you like. And maybe, I've had some people that have just kind of like a running notes tab and running notes Word document. And if they can't update their CV like right then and there, they just have this running notes document and they add it to the document. And when they get a day or so, they'll go in and refresh their CV based on all of those notes, kind of thing. Oh yeah, I need to remember to add this to my CV. Oh yeah, I need to remember to do that. So um, your CV is really a large part of what they will look at, but it's also, we're going to be talking about kind of the dossier, the packet that you will be putting together for tenure. Let's see. There is a pretty big difference if you think of kind of universities on a spectrum in terms of teaching universities and R1 universities. Um, and they have really different expectations for teaching and for research. And so it is not uncommon for at when I was graduating, so this was several years ago, it was expected that if you're going to an R1, one of the interview questions that I asked, that people ask when you're interviewing for a job, is what does the promotion and tenure process look like? And you're really trying to get at how many publications do you have to have for promotion and tenure? And at an R1 university in 5 years, it was not uncommon back then for them to say you have to have at least 15 publications. And so that's 5 a year that you have to have in those 5 years. And again, this was a couple of years ago. It is not uncommon at an R1 university for them to indicate that you have to be first author on a certain number of articles of those 15. It is not uncommon for them to indicate a journal impact factor. Not sure if you've heard that terminology, but you have to be publishing within certain types of journals that are very highly regarded journals, highly cited, highly kind of sought after journals. It is absolutely, or I would say, a requirement these days at R1s to have funding or have received funding or have applied for multiple. I mean, I think these days it's probably you have to have received funding. Those are a lot of the things that they look at. And then the teaching expectations at an R1 are not going to be as high or as rigorous in terms of looking at their teaching evaluations as a part of the promotion and tenure process. Whereas at Our Lady of the Lake, Dr. Patton and I, we spent a very long time, calculating our averages of all of our courses. We pulled quotes from our student evaluations about what could be improved on courses. And then we had a table on like what they said and how we improved that, for the course going forward to kind of show, progress in terms of teaching and listening and valuing students' input. So whereas that, expectation may not be as prevalent in an R1 institution. And a lot of times, R1 faculty members can buy out of all of their classes. So they may not even teach, they might not even have a heavy teaching load to begin with. So It really is very dependent on the type of institution that you go to. So again, teaching institution to an R1, obviously there are some that are kind of in the middle, where, you know, you're expected to publish 8 to 10, you know, within the 5 years. That's not uncommon either. So it's really definitely something that you would want in your interview process to ask about the promotion and tenure process, assuming you're applying for an assistant professor position. I would absolutely be asking about the promotion and tenure process. And then if you have the opportunity to speak to an assistant professor, whether when you go out to lunch or, you know, happy hour or something with someone, you know, I would talk with them, you know, tell me a little bit about what, you know, the PNT process has been like for you. What kind of support have you received? That kind of stuff. So definitely expectations are can vary widely depending on the university that you go to. Um, and the three main areas that they look at, I'm going to let Joy take over and talk about the three main kind of parts.
Yeah, so there's always three parts to the tenure and promotion process, and to our jobs, really. I mean, when we look at our jobs and the things that we do, we call it service to students, service to the discipline, and service to the university community. And so, but essentially it's teaching, research, and service. That's what we're looking at. So in the service to the students that's where we're talking about the teaching part of our responsibilities. And so for a teaching university, what's stressed there is, student engagement and your, professional development in your teaching and pedagogical practices and things that you're doing to improve that teaching effectiveness with your students. It can include things like if you're doing like course builds, like you're building courses, that's something that you're doing. That's part of that teaching process, because in that process, you're learning new ways of doing things, or you're recreating or creating new assignments and things of that nature. So that can be a part of that teaching process. So the emphasis is very, very heavy on teaching, and the expectation then is that we get ratings for each of these sections, right, for our tenure and promotion. So the expectation is at a teaching university, you're going to be highly rated. Most likely, a lot of universities want you to have an excellence in teaching if that's their focus as a teaching university. So the highest rating in teaching indicates you are working towards the goal and the mission of the university for teaching students. Versus a research university, the emphasis is going to be placed on that research. So some of the differences are, so at OLU we're teaching, so typically we have a 4-4 course load. We teach 4 classes in the fall, 4 classes in the spring, and that varies some depending on your role and all of those kinds of things. Other things that you may have going on, like grant projects, or if you're like doing administrative duties, or if you're doctoral faculty, sometimes those teaching loads are less. But at a research university, you're looking at probably a 2-2 in teaching, because they give you more time to do that research, write grants to get funding for your research and things like that. So, but for us at OLU, the emphasis is placed on that teaching and the excellence in teaching. And so we demonstrate our teaching effectiveness, and this is true across the board, typically by our student evaluations. Carries a lot of weight. There's been discussion for years and years about what else can we do? How else can we make this equitable for faculty, and understanding how effective we shouldn't just be relying on students and student comments, which, for me, I sometimes I get a mix. Sometimes I've had this literally polar opposites. It's like she never answers emails and she never grades her papers. And at the same time, another student is saying she's fantastic. She always answers her emails. I always get detailed feedback. And so, I mean, it can't be both, right? In the same class, I've even had it where somebody has put another professor's name for my evaluation in a different class, and I'm like, but somehow you're still responsible for addressing that it's not accurate or it doesn't accurate, but still that score, right? I don't know who did that. I don't know what score they gave me on the evaluation, so I can't parse that out, and it still affects my overall score for those evaluations. Anyway, that's kind of a sidebar, but that's one of the main pieces in that teaching effectiveness that goes towards your tenure and promotion. So those are things that you'll have to include in your packet as you're applying for tenure and promotion or those student evaluations, and you'll have to speak to it. So there's a narrative piece to this, right? So you've got to have what I call proof or evidence of what it is that you're talking about. So you've got the teaching effectiveness, you've got the student evaluations, and now you've got to write a narrative, about a 5-page narrative on what this means, what these student evaluations mean, what you've done to improve or develop professionally in your teaching throughout the 5 years that you've been doing this, to show your progress and to show that you're concerned with that continuous improvement on your teaching. But other things that go into that as well probably doesn't carry as much weight, but other things that you're doing, like advising or mentoring of students, those also go into that service to students. Professional development. So if you if you do like workshops, or you've been accepted to a training program of some sort over the summer to develop teaching skills or a teaching technique, a particular one, then that information would go in your tenure packet. And then you would just like provide an email that says, congratulations, you've been accepted, to show that you really went to this training or workshop that you say that you did to improve your teaching. But then in that, you also have to talk about how it has improved your teaching and how you've implemented this into your courses. So it's not just about attending, it's about what you did with the information you learned to improve your classes. So that's kind of what we're talking about in that service to students. At my previous institution, we had to submit student assignments, redact their names from the assignments. We had to submit the student assignments as evidence of quality work in our class and the kinds of innovative practices that we were using in our classes with our students. We also had to we had to provide grades, like the average GPA or score. So on a 4-point scale, with A being a 4, how many students received A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's. And then you had to talk about, why did you have students who made F's? If you had all A's, you had to explain, why did all your students get A's? you had to provide a rationale for the distribution of scores, is what I'm trying to get at in that teaching effectiveness. So different universities do different things as far as what you need to include in your portfolio. And like Dr. Hawley-Bernardez was saying, that's why it's important when you're interviewing to ask about that. What are the requirements? What do you need to be concerned with as you're moving through this tenure and promotion, and they call it probationary years, before you get to the promotion and tenure. At OLU, we have service to the university and community. At some universities, it's just service, so it's university and department service. for OLU, community service also matters. So we have to calculate hours, the number of hours we volunteered or done pro bono work in the community as part of that service. So that's something actually unique until I came to OLU. That's not something I'd heard of or something that I had been required to do before. But beyond that, when we're looking at service to university, we're looking at the department, we're looking at the university broadly. And so the department at OLU, we have lots of opportunity to work on committees, right? Which is considered service. We can, we have a BSW, MSW, and PhD committees. We have an awards committee where people nominate faculty and students and community members for different awards. And sometimes we have task force that pop up that you can volunteer to be on, and that's also considered service. I can't remember one that I've done recently in the department, but they pop up from time to time. Oh, I remember one that I did had something to do with our accreditation and the assessments that we were doing. We had to rewrite the assessments or something. So it was a task force that popped up. Hey, we need faculty to help. So I volunteered to help rewrite some of the assessments. So that's considered service. Service to the university, there's like I think every university has like a faculty governance, like we have faculty assembly, but some sort of faculty governance that sort of oversees the policies that affect faculty and the work that they do. And so as part of that faculty assembly or governance process, you can serve as an officer. You could be president or vice president or historian or whatever the different roles are. But also as a part of that, there are standing committees for all kinds of stuff. So for example, right now, I'm for 2 years, I've been chairing the Academic Program Review Committee, and Dr. Hawley-Bernardez, what is the name of yours? Something about policies.
The Faculty Affairs Committee.
Yeah, so you can volunteer to be on those committees, and then that carries a lot of weight for the service for the university, right? Because these are policies and processes and procedures that are affecting the entire university and all programs across the university. So participating in that, and then I think it probably carries a little bit more weight if you're a chair of one of the standing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Was there certain like category A things that you can do that carry a lot more weight than category B? And if you're on a committee, that's a category B term. But if you're chairing it and you hold the responsibilities of a chair, then that's a category A. And you have to have a certain number of category A's to get excellence or to get a rating of 4, a certain number of category B's, whatnot gets you a rating of 3 and whatnot. So they just,
Which is like,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
I was going to say they fairly recently at Our Lady of the Lake, I think right when I started, made it much more quantitative. Like if you get a category A and these are the things that are category A, this gives you this rating kind of thing. And I don't think before that, I think it was much more subjective. So it has been really helpful to have a very clear cut guidelines to what counts as different categories. Let me see if I can pull one of those up.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So we have these categories that you're rated on, right? From a scale of, I don't know, 0 to 4 is what it is at OLU. So 4 is excellent, 3 is good. I don't know what 2 is, or 1 or 0. I don't know. I try to stay up to the 3 and 4 as much as I can and not have to worry about it. But the reason the ratings matter, not just to show the level of work that you're doing, but to qualify for promotion and tenure at the associate level, you have to have at least 2 3s. So you could have a 3 in teaching and a 3 in service, but then you better have a 4 in research, right? So you got to have two threes, and a four to qualify for associate professor. And it can be any combination. So you can get a four in teaching and then a three in service and a three in research, as long as you have two threes and a four. When you go to full, you have to have two fours and a three. So you've got to be excellent in two categories and good in one category. So, and I'll talk about that in a minute, how that plays into the short-term and long-term goals and why it's important to keep those ratings in mind as you're working out the different things that you need to do each year to reach that long-term goal of tenure and promotion. I'm sorry, Alicia, were you sharing something? It's blank right now.
I'm trying to pull it up really quickly. I gotta find it though. Advancement to tenure policy. I'm trying to find where the found all the policies, but I didn't find like the rating system.
Yeah, and I think OLU is probably the most comprehensive
Here we go. Okay, this
tenure promotion document that I've ever seen. Usually it is very broad and can be interpreted in multiple different ways. This is very clear cut and straightforward. If you do these things, you get this rating. And if you get this rating of four and two threes, then you get, your tenure and your promotion.
So this is, for example, um, so this is for service to university, which is kind of what we've been talking about. And so if you are, right, like the faculty assembly president, that's a big deal. That is a category A. If you are a committee member, right? So there's lots of different committees that you could serve on. Gen Ed committee, undergraduate curriculum committee, graduate curriculum committee, policy review committees, evaluation committee. I mean, pick something, and I'm sure there's a committee for it. If you're on a committee, that's a category B. So if you are a chair, that is a category A. I was on the IRB committee for several years. I was never the chair, but I served on the IRB committee. Again, so lots of different, and then there's category C things. And then service to college or the department if you have something at the college level. So I'm chair of the BSW committee right now. That's an A. If you serve on a committee, that's a C1. Any kind of major curriculum development, just things like that. And then down here at the bottom, it tells you, if you want to get a rating of 4, you need to have at least 4 activities from the ones listed above, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then at least one of them needs to be a category A. So, if you look at category A, you should be shooting to have one of these within the 5 years of your, promotion and tenure expectations. So then let's see. Service to students is a little bit different because they, for the most part, look at your teaching evaluations. And 1, 2, 3, 4 based on what numbers of your teaching evaluations. But if you've done any of these types of things, so supervised student research, dissertation chair, committee member, served as an organization advisor, organized some kind of student event, letters of recommendations for students can often take a long time. This one has to do, any combination of the activities equals to 120 hours of service. So if you kind of calculate how many hours each year you've done each thing, and that's how you calculate this. Do you want me to do the discipline one, or do you want to just talk about the discipline
Oh,
one?
no, that's great. I think, yeah, it's great to show that. So, yeah, so the service to the discipline is your scholarly activity, essentially, is what that is. And so at teaching universities, it's a little bit less stringent than it is at a research university, obviously. Like Dr. Hawley-Bernardez was saying, that it's not unheard of to be required to have 15, 20 publications at a research at an R1 institution. And so for us at OLU, though, we have a couple of different ways. It's scholarly work, right? It's not just about publications. You can have publications, and that's great, but you can also do professional conference presentations. You can be a peer reviewer for journals. You can be a peer reviewer for conferences. I'm trying to think what else. I guess
Editorial
this.
work, like if you have done any editorial work where a journal has asked you to review an article. I was told when I started, because again, I'm trying to get a feel for what the number is, right? And I was told if you publish one a year in your 5 years, that you are in a very good, solid position for promotion and tenure. So 5 publications has been what I have shot for, plus, peer review presentations, plus all of the extra like scholarly stuff that, this is. So here's other service to discipline other than scholarly activities. So again, this is you hosted or helped plan a conference. If you've done a proposal, if you've reviewed proposals like Dr. Patton was talking about, served as a manuscript reviewer, so editorial work. If you have just demonstrated progress towards, if you've been working on something that has taken a really long time to get funding or IRB or things like that, funding, kind of thing. So it gives you some kind of ideas of things, and then this is what the scholarly, you know, benchmarks looks like. A peer-reviewed article is a category A. Peer-reviewed conference presentation is a B. A published book, a short chapter. So they tried to really think through, all of the different disciplines that might have, different thing. Editor of a scholarly journal, published instructor's manual to accompany a textbook, creative work. So if you're like an English assistant professor, or if poetry is your thing, I don't. So, and then it shows you kind of the different categories that you have. So, again, I've been very impressed with Our Lady of the Lakes benchmarks, and it has been one of the most like clear cut that I have seen. I've got friends and other people at different universities, and for the most part, this stuff is fairly private. This stuff doesn't get out a whole lot. But I've had just friends share with me kind of what the process has been like, and it's much more, I think subjective, but I don't know. Anyways, any questions about
Yeah,
these?
so instead of saying you need one publication a year or 3 publications a year, they don't really say that. They just say adequate or progressive numbers of publications until throughout the probationary period. So they make it very vague and not very clear. So if you ask, well, is that 1 publication, 2 publications a year? What are we looking at? It's like, oh, we just need to see you're making progress and you're increasing the number, and by the time you get to, so they keep it very vague. I have some hunches on why they do that.
Mm-hmm.
because then they don't you don't have something to point back to, right? To say, no, but I did get this number of publications and I did do these things. I've even heard some people say, like administrators say, well, if we tell you the exact numbers, then you'll game the system. And I'm like, how do you game a system when you say this is it, that's it?
That's the expectation. Like that, how am I supposed to meet expectations if I don't know what the expectations are?
Are exactly. So
Mhm. The other thing that other universities have that Our Lady of the Lake does not have, and I have mixed feelings about it, but I have also served as a reviewer for a faculty member at another university. So a lot of times, um, faculty members have to find someone else in social work, not their university, not it cannot be anyone that they know or have any affiliation with. It's almost
I've
like a
ever
blind
worked with or
reviewer.
published with.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost like a blind reviewer, and all of their work and expectations and everything is sent to this blind reviewer, and they look at everything that they have done and look at the expectations and basically write, their opinion on whether or not this person has met the expectations of tenure. And so that was interesting.
Yeah.
And it can be very hard to find reviewers for that, because again, you can't go around asking your friends, hey, can you do this for me, because it cannot be someone that you know at all. So oftentimes it's like, a friend of a friend of a friend who knows someone at this university who might be able to do it for you, kind of thing. So anyways, that's a whole other kind of, I forget what it's called. What did I put on my,
Outside reviewer. Yeah.
yeah, outside reviewer kind of thing. So a lot of universities also have that expectation of you need to have, and usually it's like one or two at least outside reviewers that you have to have look at all of your stuff, and the criteria, and basically say yes or no. So that's nerve wracking.
And I don't, did you put this on here? Oh, yes, you do. Okay, never mind. I just thought
Where
of something, but never mind. You've got it.
I want to make sure I cover it though. I don't know. So, are any questions about service to students or university or discipline at all? Those are the three main areas that you'll have to write about in your narrative. You probably will also have something about the mission statement and how, your work that you've done ties to the mission of the university, what your plan is for the future, kind of thing. So it's a little more than just these things. Um, but these are kind of the bulk of where you're going to be evaluated on, I guess I
Yeah.
would say.
And it's a 5-page narrative for each one of those sections. I just wanted to clarify that because I said 5 pages, but it's 5 pages for each one. So 15 pages total for just that
Mhm.
narrative piece. So,
And
which I
and
think
I'm trying to. I don't know if 5 pages is about normal, or you think that's less than. I don't know.
I think it is about normal from what
I-
I hear from my friends and what I've seen. Yeah.
So, in addition to those 5 pages of each thing, you have to show proof that you have done those things. So, when I first started, Dr. Gomez showed me her. This was before everything was submitted online. She had a whole binder of, I mean, like this thick for her promotion and tenure file. And obviously it included all the narratives, which is only 15, 15, 20-ish pages. But then it has proof of all of the articles that you've published, all of the conferences that you've been accepted to, all of the funding that you've gotten and applied to, all of the work that you've done with students and evaluations. I mean, you have to keep track. That was one thing Dr. Patton and I were working on a few summers ago, was just finding emails from this person or that person that said we did this or that. And submitting all of that, the documentation with it as well.
Yeah, yeah, that organization piece I would say is extremely important in keeping everything straight. And I try. But performance reviews also play into it, right? So you have a performance review every year where you have to talk about everything that you've done in this past academic year. And so to me, that's helpful. So that's the time that I like update my CV. If I haven't done it, I download all my documentation for the things that I have done and keep those in a file each year. So then it's easier to go back and pull all of that information when I submit for tenure and promotion because I have them by year
Mhm.
in folders for each one of those categories. So I save that, but it's the performance review. I try to do it as it happens, but I don't always do it. And I'm doing the performance review. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I did that too. And then I have to go find it and then put it in my folder. But
Mhm.
doing that, it really helps keep everything on track so you're not looking last minute. But then we were having conversations. It's like, wait a minute, we did do that, didn't we? When did
Mhm.
we do that?
I know. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes I do, and I just remember like in my performance review, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot to put that
Yeah.
whole
Mhm.
professional development thing we did last summer.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Forgot to put
Um,
that in there. So
the other part of kind of your dossier will be a teaching statement or, a teaching philosophy and a research statement. Um, Obviously, all of your documented evidence of everything that you've done. So then it goes, so it takes almost, again, in our experience, it took almost the full sixth year to go to the different levels. So you submit it initially by a certain date to the beginning of the semester. And then it goes first to, the department. So your own supervisor kind of reads everything, submits a letter of recommendation or whatever they need to submit. Then it goes to the college level, and then it goes to the university promotion and tenure, committee. Then it will go to the provost. Then it will go to the president, and then it will usually then have to go to president's council. And the president's council is who votes on whether or not to accept, whatever number of tenured faculty. One of the things that I didn't know is that each university, I don't know how it works, so don't ask me about this, but for the most part, there's a certain number of tenured slots that a university has allotted for their faculty members. And so, if you have more than the number of slots available, then obviously everyone may not get tenure. I don't know how it works at R1 universities, but I know I was told at one point we have a certain number of tenured slots at Our Lady of the Lake, and I'm not sure the reasoning behind that, or I'm sure it's some funding related issue, but
right.
President's Council is ultimately who votes to approve, your tenure or not.
And I just also want to add to that too on that for OLU, they said they'd only hire the number of uh, people in tenure track positions that they have slots for. So they're not hiring more faculty for tenure positions than they have tenure positions. So if you've done what you need to do at OLU, then you get that tenure. However, and this goes back to that promotion and tenure thing that you were talking about being separate processes. I have a friend that's at a university now that's not the case. They hire more tenure track faculty than tenure track positions that they have, with the assumption that some people are not going to get tenure. And so what happened at their university one year is they had people going up for tenure and there were no open slots. People hadn't retired, people had gotten tenure, and there were no open slots. So what they did was give them promotion to associate professor without tenure. And then they had to keep reapplying every year. I think it took 2 years, but they had to reapply for the tenure every year after that until a slot came open for them. So it does happen at some universities that, and I think that's why that promotion and tenure is a separate process for some universities in particular. So yeah. The other thing I want to say is it also goes to the board. So from the president, it goes to the board, and the board has to approve it. I think the president council
Is our
votes yay or nay, and then sends it to the board for the approval of yay or nay. And then it comes back down to the provost. In public universities, it goes to the state board of education for approval, and then comes back down the pipe for the final approval. So yeah, it takes a long time. Academia is slow.
and you will usually need to have letters of recommendation from one or two faculty members. I think we had to get letters from two faculty members who were already associate. And um yeah, they had to write associate and tenured, I think.
And
So,
then we sent our packets to them so they could see all the things that we had done. So it's kind of like a outside review, except it's internal because it doesn't have to be in your department. It can be anybody that is an associate level in the university. So maybe that's Olu's way of doing that
yeah.
sort of outside review without getting people outside the university. I don't know.
And the other thing that I'm sure this is, well, I don't know, I don't want to say I'm sure, but the other thing that Our Lady of the Lake did have is mentors, promotion and tenure mentors. So oftentimes it is someone who is either on the promotion and tenure committee or has served on the promotion and tenure committee. And they, are someone that you could submit your stuff to and ask them for feedback, either in the third year review or in your fourth year, when you're getting ready to submit. I submitted my stuff. I think Dr. Patton did too, to someone to take a look at to say, can you give me some feedback on this? Is there anything you would have me add or take out or reword? Am I on the right track? Kind of thing. So that's definitely, I would, so kind of going into kind of these strategies for success. Definitely look for, feedback and mentorship within the university. You can either do it within your own department or at the college level. They had some people who were the promotion and tenure mentors. Um, how do we find mentors? So Eden, when you go to your third year review, they had a meeting for us, um, for people who were going up for their third year review. And at that meeting, they had a whole presentation about what you do and the deadlines and when you do it. And at that meeting, they listed the promotion and tenure mentors. So Jerry Jackson, I think, was one. Certainly, Dr. Cuevas was one of the ones who looked at my stuff as well. And I think there's another person as well. I just remember Dr. Jackson. Um, but I can definitely kind of direct you in the right.
I think it's one person from each college
Yeah.
that they designate as a mentor. Yeah.
Yes, I think I saw the link in the academic affair in the benchmark. There is also a link based on my memory. There is a link for the mentor.
Mm.
See over there. Faculty. You can scroll down.
So Elon, you do have a mentor? You have a mentor?
No, I have not have yet, but I was seeking for mentor too because I need help. And then
Yeah.
I remember there was a link in
Here we
that,
go.
yes,
Here we
in the
go.
benchmark.
PNT
Yes,
mentor
yes,
the
PNT
account.
mentor, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw there is a 2 or 3 mentor from the CPS, and then I'm not sure
Yeah.
about out of both CPS, but
Bernadette. Yeah.
yes, I was thinking about contact them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's more than one. I
And
thought there was one.
And I think, Dr. Kwan and Dr. Robles, I mean, if the four of us want to get together, I don't want to speak for Dr. Patton, but I feel pretty confident that we would be happy to meet and help you as well. But uh,
Yeah, it sounds wonderful.
either Jerry Patton or
Yes.
Bernadette or Dr. Cuevas would be also great as well.
Yes,
Um,
please, please, please.
okay, I'll see about maybe setting something up towards the end of the semester if that sounds good with you guys.
Sounds
I
great. Thank you so
I
much.
promised to share my stuff with you and I completely forgot. But yeah, if we want to set it up, we can go through. We can show both of our packets to you and share that with both of you so you can see what we did and how we
Ye-
set it up. So
Yes, that would be so
It would
appreciated.
be
I think
wonderful. Yes.
the first thing that I would absolutely recommend, and the thing that I don't know that it was the hardest. Well, it probably was the hardest. Is really just like thinking through everything that you have done and collecting and making sure you have the evidence and documentation of everything. So I wish I had. I mean, I think I'm a fairly organized person, but I wish I had been even more organized with my CV and with all of the documentation earlier, because I feel like I spent a lot of time kind of, finding things or thinking about things, brainstorming with Dr. Patton about what all happened, what all we've done. So definitely, that would probably be some of my recommendations. Getting involved in committees, obviously you have to have one of those category A's in order to get a 4. So look at the category A's on the service to university and be thinking about kind of where, trajectory of how you want to do that. Um,
that's what I mean, and that's essentially what I did was I looked at what are all the requirements. And
mhm.
I don't know why I do this, but I always do it. Whatever it says you need for a 4, then I always make sure I have one more just in
Yeah.
case I misunderstood or something goes terribly wrong. I do this plus one more, but all the things that are required to get a 4, and then I plan it out over each year. Like I'm going to do one publication every year. I'm going to do one presentation every year. So that way, that's sort of that short-term planning, right? Each year, here are my goals. So if this publication didn't work out in year 1, now I'm going to make sure that I get that one and another one done in that second year. So by the time I get to that end of the 5th year, everything that I've done has accumulated over that 5-year period to reach the maximum level in each one of those categories that I could get for to get a 4 to make sure that I was on track. And another thing I would say about the 3rd year review is, yeah, if you're, they do a review of what you've done and they tell you kind of, report back to you, this is where you are and this is where you need to be. So if you are falling short, yeah, sometimes faculty go, okay, this is, I can't catch that up that much by the time I get to my tenure. So I need to start looking elsewhere.
Mhm.
But they tell you, this is what you have and this is what you still need that we see for in order for you to get tenure, which is great because you can see whether you're on track or if you need to catch up somewhere, you can catch up in one of those categories. And they let you know exactly what that is, what you need to do, what you can expect to have done by the time you submit. So
Yeah. Are there any questions? We're coming up on time, and I want to make sure that there's plenty of time for questions.
Yes, I have one. Thank you for the presentation. Yes, I am following, but I'm still nervous about tenure. And then, yes, it was good to know about so many tips you have been through. And then my question, Dr. Patton mentioned about, okay, so annual performance review can be part of your tenure promotion. And then is there something else you need to prepare in addition to annual performance review? Of course, the benchmark is different, can be different a little bit. But in other than that, in other than the annual performance review, was there any other important thing you need to more focus on?
I agree with you, Alon. It's a little confusing because the requirements for the performance review are different than the requirements for tenure, right? So what I did is I just looked at what are the requirements for tenure, and I made sure I hit on those things every year. And then that seemed to satisfy the performance review as far as the rating that I got. So my rating then was equal on the performance review to the 4 that I was reaching for on that year for tenure. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, makes sense.
So there's not anything extra to do. They don't correspond very well, at least right at the moment. But you do have to put your performance review in your tenure packet. So you have to talk about your performance review and how you've progressed through the years on your performance, and put those performance reviews in your packet as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I was also curious. I was like, what am I going to do with this performance review? But I went ahead and I saved it. I was just like, I'll just save it and we'll keep it there.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have to be turned in at the very end. I guess in that way that it's kind of helpful for developing the list, right? I mean, right, in some way, I guess, like list of all the things that I do.
Yeah, let me share my screen with you real quick because this is so I have a whole like promotion and tenure folder, and then obviously you can see, multiple copies of my CV. I've got my mid-year review feedback. And then I've got a promotion and tenure material. And so this is where I break it down into service to discipline, service to students, and service to university and community. And and then we also, I think, had to have long-term goals that we talk about. But then in each one, I have my narrative, and then I have like I think Joy and I called it like the evidence to show what, so this is, kind of a proof of, what I did for each year, evidence of achievement is what I called it. And then the narrative looks, that was the midpoint. Let's see what the narrative, I don't know if this one's the accurate one or not. And then obviously you can see all of my, these are all my documents of proof, and the evidence.
So that list was her evidence. She was saying, here's all the things that I've done. And so they could take that list and then go back into her folder and go, okay, this on her list is this thing right here, and open it and see that she really did that thing.
Yeah.
And so then here's my 5-page narrative. We did a table that kind of showed all of the category A activities, all of the category B activities, service to community, and then all of the documentation for service to community as well. So, this is just one of my narratives for the service to.
And to me, this table was really helpful because you have to give a self rating, right? And so when you go back to the tenure documents, the benchmarks, and you list all these things out, here are all the category A's. Well, according to the benchmarks for tenure, you need to have this many things for category A to get a 4 in this area. And so it's very clearly and plainly laid out for them to see I've met or exceeded the benchmark for each one of those areas that we're talking about. So the table was very helpful for me.
Yeah. And then for the service to students, you're calculating your score, your N, you're using quotes from feedback, what kind of assessments, so I did a midterm evaluation for all of my courses. And then this is where Dr. Patton and I had a student comment, and then, what changes you implemented because of that. Other things that you did on top of student, just student evaluations. And then of course the table, the show, everything. And then, so, obviously you have your course evaluations for every single semester that you taught, but then what other kind of service to students stuff that do you do? So obviously I do a lot of Cafecito events for students like these. I do, we did a lot of those self-care, mindfulness classes. We did, you know, I did a licensing prep overview. I did the PhD residency presentations, accountability group. So other things other than just course evaluations that you do for students. So be thinking about, what kinds of things do you do for students that's more than just, teaching, because I know you guys do a lot of things. So yeah, we've gone over time a little bit, but any other questions at all? Awesome. Okay. Well, great. Well,
So Dr. HB, is it fair to say in summation, know the expectations early,
mhm.
have a plan, and just keep everything where you can find it? Is that pretty much a good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And be organized. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you guys. Hope you have a great rest of the semester, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for presentation. Bye,
Yeah,
guys.
of course.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.